Welcome to the Criminal Law and Procedure Lecture Series. At the end of each slide, there will be a 10-second delay. Use this time to stop the lecture and take your notes. When you are done, push play to continue. This lecture will begin in 5 seconds. Welcome to Criminal Law and Procedure Lecture 1.6 on Criminal Defenses Part 1 Excuse State of Mind, and let's talk about everybody's favorite wizard, Harry Potter. You know, the boy who made J.K. Rowling a multimillionaire. Well, J.K. Rowling made herself a multimillionaire, and it's because the characters in her stories are complex. Harry's complex, his friends are complex, and even his teachers are complex. But perhaps the most complex character of all is this guy, Severus Snape. And yeah, he is way cool. You see, Snape is on Potter's side, but he used to be on this guy's side. He who shall not be named, Lord Voldemort. Snape also wants a job. He wants to teach defense against the dark arts, but as he unfortunately learns, they say the job is jinxed, and once he gets the job, he dies. But here's the thing, Snape wants to teach kids like Harry how to survive when somebody like Voldemort casts a spell. And here's how it works. The spell is cast by Voldemort, and once the spell is cast, the defense is made against the spell. Now, use the right defense, and you can defeat the spell, and you can defeat your enemy. Use the wrong defense, and you're done. Well, the same idea holds true in criminal law. Here's the deal. You can violate a criminal law, but if you use the right defense, you will not be held liable for your violation. With that said, let's move on to the next slide. You do not provide an affirmative defense when you walk into court and say, I didn't do it, or you can't prove that I violated a law. Instead, we need to understand what constitutes or makes up a valid affirmative defense to see how this concept works in the law. A person with a valid affirmative defense is not liable for violating the law, even if they committed or attempted to commit a prohibited act. What does this look like? You committed a criminal act, but you present a valid defense, so you are not guilty. In other words, it's not, I didn't do it, it's, I did it, but I'm not guilty. What do these affirmative defenses look like? There are two types of generally recognized affirmative defenses. Excuse defenses focus on either an offender's understanding and state of mind. What were you thinking at the time of the prohibited act? These are mistake of law and insanity defenses. Or we focus on the actions of a defendant. What were you doing? How were you physically? These are intoxication, offender's age, and entrapment defenses. Justification defenses focus on someone violating a criminal act for reasons that society deems are acceptable. You violated the law, but in your circumstance, that's okay. These are consent, self-defense, duress, and necessity defenses. Go to the next slide. Today we focus on state of mind excuse defenses, and we start by understanding the difference between ignorance of the law versus mistake of the law. Ignorance of the law is not a criminal defense. People are presumed to generally know and understand the law, and we make this presumption because criminal laws are codified or written into federal, state, and local codes. We see this ignorance of the law problem all the time when it comes to people paying their taxes. There's a whole load of excuses. I didn't know I needed to pay. My accountant told me not to pay. My tax lawyer told me not to pay. Nobody cares. You should have known to pay your taxes because it's written into the law, and in some cases, You're going to jail if you didn't pay your taxes. Mistake of the law, on the other hand, is a limited criminal defense. Here's how it works: an offender makes a reasonable mistake regarding a separate, non criminal law, usually by relying on a statement by the government. Because of this, the offender lacks the mens rea necessary to establish guilt for a criminal act. They never had the mental state of mind to commit the crime in the first place. What does this look like? Let's go visit our local National Wildlife Refuge. We go down to the refuge and we find a government pamphlet. And the government pamphlet said, entry is allowed in April. But the law said it was a crime to enter during April to protect migrating birds. This might be a possible mistake of the law defense. Go to the next slide. The other state of mind excuse defense is well known. It's the insanity defense. You know, sanity versus insanity. Easy, right? If it were only this simple. The mental well being of an offender can be used as a criminal defense, but there are 5 different applications of this rule. What does that mean? It means there are 5 different types of insanity defenses, and it all depends on where you are in this country when it comes to what type of insanity defense applies. So let's look at the 5 different types of insanity defenses. The Naughton rule defines a person as insane if, at the time he committed the act, he could not tell right from wrong. This is a straightforward insanity rule. It's also the oldest type of insanity defense, and it is the law in most states in the United States, including Virginia. We move a little bit off the McNaughton rule when we talk about the irresistible impulse test. This defines a person as insane if he should or did not know that his actions were illegal. So you can even know that you are committing a crime, but because of mental impairment, you couldn't control your behavior. You had an uncontrollable urge or an irresistible impulse because of a mental deficiency that caused you to commit the crime. Go to the next slide. Our last 3 insanity defenses are a perfect example of what happens when the law gets a little weird. We had a federal court case called Durham versus the United States, in which the insanity defense was raised. Out of that case came the Durham rule, or the product test, which defines a person as insane if his unlawful act was the product of mental disease or defect. This is much easier to prove than the McNaughton rule because no longer did the defendant have to prove that he was insane. Now, the prosecutor had to prove that the defendant was sane. That's a lot harder to do, and because of this, a lot of people were found not guilty by reason of insanity, including this guy. His name is John Hinckley Jr., and his claim to fame is that he tried to assassinate this guy, the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan. People realized we needed to change. Congress's answer was to enact the Insanity Defense Reform Act, which defines a person as insane if the defendant, as a result of severe mental disease or defect, was unable to appreciate the nature and quality or the wrongfulness of his acts. It sounds like the McNaughton rule, but it's much harder to prove because now the defendant has to show that they had a severe mental disease or defect. Law professors also took a crack at changing the insanity defense, and they came up with the substantial capacity test, which defines a person as insane if mental illness has deprived him of effective power to make the right choices in governing his own behavior. What does that mean? Well, we all have the ability to make right choices. But if your ability is deprived or stopped by mental illness, under the substantial capacity test, you are not guilty by reason of insanity. Thank you for watching this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in class.